It's the end of an era for the Boston Bruins as they trade Brad Marchand and now start again. Ian McLaren of Locked On Bruins joins us to discuss his legacy and what lies ahead for the Bruins next on the Locked On NHL Podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Boston Bruins, Ian McLaren. And Ian, as I said in the opening, it's the end of an era with Brad Marchand heading out, last member of the 2011 Stanley Cup winning team who was on the roster. Talk to me about his legacy in Boston and what this trade means for the Bruins organization.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a shock that he was traded and then, of course, dealt to the Florida Panthers as an extra little kind of kick to Bruins fans. Obviously, his legacy, just one of the greatest Bruins of all time, just flat out. He will be in the Hall of Fame one day. He will have his number retired. His career arc is so fascinating, going from a fourth liner back in that cup year in 2011, working through some discipline issues early on in his career, and then emerging as one of the best left wingers in the NHL over the last handful of seasons. And, he was the captain here near the end and really took that mantle of leadership from Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron. And a lot of people were hopeful that he would end his career in black and gold, but this is the situation at hand, and he will try to go win a cup with a couple of guys now in management in Florida who were on that 2011 team in Sean Thornton and Gregory Campbell, who both work in the front office down in Florida.
What do you think the Bruins will miss most about Marchand, at least in the short term?
I mean, yeah, in the short term, obviously, he still has a lot of gas left in the tank. He was still this team's second leading scorer this season. Obviously, his leadership, that kind of carryover from those previous leadership regimes, and just kind of the cachet that after the Stanley Cup so long ago. Now, yeah, it's been 14 years. It's crazy that it's been that long. Just his leadership, his tenacity, his perseverance, all the things that have made him a great Bruin will certainly be missed, as well as his personality, his contributions to the community. Just a lot of people, a lot of Bruins fans kind of rightly grieving this trade over the weekend for sure.
Were you disappointed with the return in this deal?
I definitely was. I was thinking that they should and could have gotten more. Now, over the weekend, we kind of got some more details as to how this trade actually happened and why he was traded to Florida. Elliot Friedman on Sportsnet over the weekend was reporting that the Bruins management and Marchand had kind of a face-to-face meeting, and they kind of were in agreement on term, but Marchand was willing to bend a bit on his ask in terms of value. The Bruins were unwilling to do so. And then it became clear that they needed to deal him instead of losing him for nothing as an unrestricted free agent in the summer. And then again, because of that relationship he had with some guys in the front office down in Florida, I also think because of his experience at the Four Nations face-off and hanging out with Sam Reinhart, even Sam Bennett, even that a year ago would have seemed crazy that they're not buddies. But also I think too, just say to the Bruins, if you're not going to cough up to keep me here, then send me to the team that has eliminated the Bruins from the playoffs in each of the last 2 years, just as kind of a little, not parting shot, but just that's where he wanted to go. And with Florida knowing that, it was a very limited field. And obviously, even to get a second or a conditional first in that circumstance isn't bad, but still the optics in terms of Don Sweeney and Bruins management right now, not great at all.
How about some of the players that the team did add at the deadline? I mean, Casey Middlestat probably being the most prominent. Where do the new guys fit in? And I think Charlie Coyle is going to be missed as just an underrated kind of a guy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Marchand was the captain, Coyle, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, who was traded to the Leafs. They all wore letters at some point as well. There's a real kind of that leadership group is now just vacated the locker room. So there will be some guys who will need to step up. But I mean, looking at the trade deadline as a whole, right up to the point where it was announced that Marchand was going to the Panthers, I thought Don Sweeney did pretty amazing here at the trade deadline, to get a first round pick and a prospect from the Maple Leafs for Brandon Carlo, to get Casey Middlestat, who has still some pretty high upside and 7 years younger than Charlie Coyle, along with a top prospect in Will Zellers and a second round pick for Charlie Coyle, who's, 33 going on 34 here. Even the smaller moves that they did, trading Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau, like the Bruins brought in a pretty nice haul here at the deadline for it's not a rebuild, because you still have the core of Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak to build around, as well as Hampus Lindholm, Pavel Zacha as kind of secondary guys. Casey Middlestat, he had 2 points in win over the Tampa Bay Lightning on Saturday that absolutely nobody saw coming. He'll step in kind of as a second, middle six center for this team, but he could even have an opportunity to jump up and play with David Pastrnak if they have some chemistry. So they've been looking for younger centers to come in and be used in the top six. Elias Lindholm hasn't really panned out. Kind of looking more like a middle six center as well. So there's a real opportunity here for a guy like Casey Middlestat to be one of the top centers on this team. And he's shown in the past with some almost 60-point seasons that he does have some offensive upside there that the Bruins hopefully can tap into.
So what happens next this offseason? I mean, obviously there's a strong retool going on. This team is regrouping, to say the least. What are the next steps that you expect from the Bruins, and what's the timetable for them to return to playoff contention?
I mean, the Bruins ownership group came out on the weekend and gave Cam Neely, team president, and Don Sweeney, the general manager, a full vote of confidence. And what's most curious to me about all these moves is that they had just this past summer invested a lot in Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, who are guys who were supposed to complement the group that beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs last year and pushed Florida to a Game 6. So all of these moves last week, within that context, it's a bit curious because they do have so much money invested in those guys. I would think that their goal would be to get back into the playoff mix as soon as next year. They'll probably try to get as high a draft pick as possible here in 2025. But again, they still have that trio of players to build around that, would be a lot of teams would love to build around Swayman, McAvoy, Pastrnak, even if Swayman's having a bit of a down year. What's next is probably, riding out this season. Unlikely to make the playoffs, even though they did beat Tampa the other day. Trying to get a decent first-round pick, reevaluating interim head coach Joe Sacco and probably replacing him with someone more permanent. And then, the money that they were going to spend on Brad Marchand, reinvest that somewhere else this offseason and try to add some more pieces, specifically up front where they do need a lot of scoring for sure.
Yeah, goal scoring seems to be a big issue right now.
Definitely.
Ian, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, the podcast is on your favorite podcast app. It's on YouTube. People can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and I am at Ian C. McLaren.
All right, Ian, thank you so much.
No problem, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by Factor. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to help keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I recently tried their Protein Plus meals, and they were packed with flavor and kept me full throughout the day. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.